Now let's talk about the digestion of food. The process of digestion is accomplished by mechanical and chemical processes. The buccal cavity performs two major functions. First of all, the mastication of food and facilitation of swallowing. So it means that the food is broken down mechanically and it is mixed with the saliva so that it can be swallowed very easily. The teeth and the tongue, with the help of saliva, masticate and mix up the food thoroughly. The mucus in saliva helps in lubricating and adhering the masticated food particles into a bolus. The bolus is then conveyed into the pharynx, then into the esophagus by swallowing or deglutition. The bolus from the pharynx further passes down through the esophagus by successive waves of muscular contraction called peristalsis. So this is a very important process, that is peristalsis, which leads to the movement of the bolus through the esophagus. The gastroesophageal sphincter controls the passage of food into the stomach. The saliva secreted into the oral cavity contains electrolytes and enzymes, salivary amylase and lysozyme. The chemical process of digestion is initiated itself in the oral cavity by the hydrolytic action of the carbohydrate splitting enzyme, the salivary amylase. About 30% of starch is hydrolyzed here by this enzyme. The optimum pH for this process is 6.8 and the starch is hydrolyzed into a disaccharide that is called maltose. Lysozyme present in saliva act as an antibacterial agent that prevents infections. The mucosa of stomach. So now we are moving to the next place of digestion, that is stomach. It has gastric glands. Now the gastric glands have three major types of cells, namely first mucous neck cells, as the name suggests, which secretes mucus. Second, peptic or chief cells, which secrete the coenzyme pepsinogen. Third, parietal or oxyntic cells, which secrete HCl, that is hydrochloric acid, and intrinsic factor vitamin B12. The stomach stores the food for 4 to 5 hours. The food mixes thoroughly with the acidic gastric juice of the stomach by the churning movement of its muscular wall, because stomach is made up of muscles, so it is going to move and it is going to provide a churning action for the mixing of the food, and now the food mixed with the gastric juice is called chyme. The proenzyme pepsinogen, that is secreted by the gastric glands, on exposure to HCl, that is also secreted by the gastric glands, gets converted into the active enzyme pepsin. So pepsinogen is an inactive form and pepsin is the activated form. That is the proteolytic enzyme of the stomach. So it means it is going to act on proteins. So pepsin converts proteins into proteoses and peptones, that are peptides. The mucus and the biocarbonates that are present in the gastric juice, they play an important role in lubrication and protection of the mucosal epithelium from the corrosion that will be caused by the concentrated hydrochloric acid. If we remember that HCl is important for the activation of pepsinogen, so that is why HCl is produced in the stomach, but because we have to protect our stomach from the HCl also, we have mucus that is secreted by the stomach. Renin is another proteolytic enzyme that is found in the gastric juices of infants only. Infants only because it helps in the digestion of milk proteins. So that is why renin is important there. Small amounts of lipases are also secreted by the gastric glands. Various types of movements are generated by the muscularis layer of the small intestine. This movement helps in the mixing of the food with various secretion in the intestine and thereby facilitate digestion. The bile, pancreatic juice and intestine juice are secretion released into the small intestine. So we have three kinds of juices or secretion in the small intestine: bile, pancreatic juice and intestine juice. The pancreatic juice and bile, they are released through the hepatopancreatic duct. The pancreatic juice contains inactive enzymes like trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen, procarboxypeptidases, amylases, lipases, nucleases. Trypsinogen is activated by an enzyme enterokinase. So trypsinogen is also an inactivated inactivated enzyme, so it needs to be activated. So that is activated by an enzyme enterokinase that is secreted by the intestinal mucosa, and thus trypsinogen will become the active trypsin, which will activate the other enzyme in the pancreatic juice. So this is how the enzymes in the pancreatic juice, they are activated. The bile that is released from the gallbladder, it has bile pigments, bilirubin and biliverdin, bile salts, cholesterol and phospholipids, but no enzyme. So what is the function of bile? So bile helps in emulsification of fats. So it breaks down fats into very small micelles, and it also activates lipases. So it means that bile is important for the digestion of fats. So it is breaking down the fats in the food or in the chyme so that they can be broken down easily. The intestinal mucosal epithelium has goblet cells which secretes mucus. The secretion of the brush border cells of the mucosa along with the secretion of the goblet cell constitute the intestinal juice or succus entericus. This juice contains a variety of enzymes like maltase, dipeptidases, lipases and nucleosidases. The mucus that is released from the small intestine along with the bicarbonates from the pancreas protects the intestinal mucosa from the acid as well as provide an alkaline medium for enzymatic activity. So we know that food that is coming from the stomach is acidic in nature. So now there are bicarbonates that are present in the pancreas and there is mucus that is secreted by intestine. Both will protect the intestinal mucosa and will also provide an alkaline medium for enzymatic activity. Some mucosal glands like Brunner's gland, they also help in maintaining the pH. Now, the digestion of different types of nutrients is given here. So first we will talk about the digestion of proteins. So proteins, proteoses and peptones in the chyme reaching the intestine are acted upon by the proteolytic enzymes of the pancreatic juice. So first pancreatic juice is going to act on the protein and they will be forming dipeptides now. So we will have dipeptides. After that, carbohydrates that are present in the chyme, they are hydrolyzed by pancreatic amylase into disaccharides. So we will have disaccharides in the end. Then the fats that are broken down by lipases with the help of bile. So we already know the bile helps in the emulsification of the fats and they will form diglycerides and monoglycerides. The nucleases in the pancreatic juice, they act on nucleic acid and they will form nucleotides and nucleosides. The enzymes that are present in intestinal juice, they act on the end products of the reaction from the pancreatic juices. So what are the products from the pancreatic juice? Dipeptides, disaccharides, monoglycerides, diglycerides, nucleosides. So now the intestinal juice, the enzymes that are present in intestinal juice are going to act on these products. So now the final steps in digestion, they occur in intestine. So what will happen? The dipeptides will be digested into amino acids. It will be broken down into amino acids by the help of dipeptidases. Maltose will be broken down into glucose and glucose by the enzyme maltase. Lactose will be broken down into glucose and galactose by lactase. Sucrose will be broken down into glucose and fructose by sucrase. The nucleotides, they will be first broken down in nucleosides by the enzyme nucleotidases, and in the end it will be digested by nucleosidases to form sugars and bases. The di and monoglycerides will be digested by lipases into fatty acids and glycerol. So in the end we will have nutrients that can be absorbed and assimilated. So we have amino acids, glucose, fructose, galactose, sugars, bases, fatty acids and glycerol. The breakdown of biomacromolecules that are mentioned before this occurs in the duodenum region of the small intestine. The simple substances that are formed as the result of this, they are absorbed in the jejunum and ileum region of the small intestine. So whatever absorption is going to take place of the simple substances will happen in the jejunum and ileum region. That is why they have villi that will increase the area of absorption. The undigested and unabsorbed substances then are passed into the large intestine. The main function of the large intestine are absorption of some water, whatever water is present in the feces, minerals and certain drugs, secretion of mucus which will help in the adhering the waste particles together so that it can be flushed out of the body, and lubricating it for an easy passage. So these are the function of large intestine. The last part of large intestine is the rectum, where the feces will be stored, and after that they will be passed through the anus. So the feces, they enter the cecum of the large intestine through ileocecal wall, which prevents the backflow of the fecal matter. It is temporarily stored in the rectum till defecation. The activities of the gastrointestinal tract are under neural and hormonal control for proper coordination of different parts. So when the digestion will start, how much enzymes they are required, and if there is any kind of regulation that is done, it is through neural and hormonal control. The sight, smell or the presence of food in the oral cavity can stimulate the secretion of saliva. That is something that all of us have observed. The muscular activities of different parts of the alimentary canal can also be moderated by neural mechanism, both local and through CNS. And we have also talked about this in the previous classes, and we will also talk about this in the further lessons. Hormonal control of the secretion of digestive juices is carried out by the local hormone produced by the gastric and intestinal mucosa, and we will learn about this in forward direction when we will move to control and coordination. Now, the absorption of digestive products. The absorption is the process by which the end product of digestion passes through the intestinal mucosa into the blood or a lymph. It is mostly carried out by passive, active or facilitated transfer mechanism. Small amounts of monosaccharide like glucose, amino acid and some of the electrolytes like chloride ion, they can be gently absorbed by simple diffusion because of the concentration gradients, and that is why they are highly dependent on the concentration gradient present in the blood. However, some of the substances like fructose, some amino acid, they are absorbed with the help of the carrier ions, and this is called facilitated transport. Transport of water depends on the osmotic gradient. Active transport occurs against the concentration gradient and hence requires energy. So if there is active transport of any material, any nutrient, then there will be requirement of energy. Various nutrients like amino acids, monosaccharide like glucose, electrolytes, they are absorbed into the blood by this mechanism, that is active transport. Fatty acid and glycerol, because they are insoluble, they cannot be absorbed into the blood. They are first incorporated into small droplets called micelles, which move into the intestinal mucosa. So they will form a certain structure and then it can be absorbed into the blood. Now, after how they will form this structure? They are reformed into very small protein coated globules, and because now they are protein coated, they are called chylomicrons, and they are transported into the lymph vessels in the villi, and this lymph vessel will release the substances into the bloodstream. So now because it has protein coat, it is going to be transported to the blood. The maximum absorption of nutrients takes place in the small intestine. So this is how different nutrients, they are absorbed in different parts of digestive system. In mouth, certain drugs are absorbed, okay, because our tongue or side of the mouth, they also have blood capillaries. Stomach, absorption of water, sometimes simple sugars and alcohol. Small intestine, the maximum absorption takes place in the small intestine. So digestion is completed here. The final products of digestion like glucose, fructose, fatty acid, glycerol, amino acid, they are absorbed through the mucosa into the bloodstream. Absorption of water, some minerals and drug takes place in the large intestine. The absorbed substances in all the parts, they will finally reach the tissue and the tissues are going to utilize them for their activities. This process is called assimilation. The ejection of feces to the outside through the anal opening is a voluntary process, something that we can control, and it's carried by a mass peristaltic movement, the movement that is similar to the movement in the esophagus. Let's talk about the disorders of the digestive system. The inflammation of the intestinal tract is the most common ailment due to bacterial or viral infection. The infections are also caused by the parasites of the intestine like tapeworm, threadworm, hookworm, pinworm, etc. So first disorder that we are going to discuss is jaundice. So in jaundice, the liver is affected, so there will be some kind of infection that is going to impact the liver, and that is why the skin and eyes will turn yellow due to the deposits of bile pigments. The second disorder is vomiting. So it is the ejection of stomach contents through the mouth. So this reflex action is controlled by the vomit center in the medulla, and it is an involuntary process. So we feel some kind of nausea and then we will vomit, and vomiting can be caused by a lot of triggers. So it can be because you have eaten too much, it can be because that there is some kind of indigestion. Next disorder is diarrhea. So diarrhea means the abnormal frequency of bowel movement. So it means if the ejection is not normal, the fecal discharge, they are more liquid in nature, it is known as diarrhea, and it reduces the absorption of the nutrients in the food. Next disorder is constipation. So in constipation, the feces are retained within the rectum as the bowel movements occur irregularly. So the feces, they are not passed out regularly, so they are retained in the rectum. Indigestion, in this condition the food is not properly digested, leading to feeling of fullness. So indigestion can be caused by inadequate enzyme secretion, anxiety, food poisoning, overeating and spicy food. So these are the disorders of digestive system. Now the lesson is complete. This is for the recapitulation of the lesson. So this is a concept map, and you can see how different parts, they are doing different functions and how they are connected to other functions also. So we can see, if we look at this, small intestine has duodenum, jejunum, ileum, mesentery, that is another type of tissue which will support piles. It goes to large intestine. We can see that there are different kinds of secretions by liver, pancreas, and what they will do. So this is how the concept map of digestive system will look. Now these are some assessment questions, the questions that are very important, and questions that if you have learned the lessons, or if you have been paying attention to the lesson, you can easily answer. So this is all about the lesson. Thank you so much.